Dan, the older I get, the more I learn about myself.
Oh boy. Oh, really?
Yes, I I have noticed that when I drive down my road, I will notice things about my neighbors' houses or yards. Like they didn't mow or they didn't trim or their gutters hanging off the side of their house. And if I'm being honest, my house probably looks worse.
So in other words, other your neighbors are driving by your house with the same thought.
Well, why would they say bad things about me?
I don't know.
Yeah.
They're getting old like you.
Yeah. So where I live, we have a number of houses that set way off the road. But as you go down towards the state road, the houses are closer. And I noticed a house that has um, trees growing out of their gutters. You know, um, and my assumption is they're maple trees. Like those little helicopters
Yes.
that fly off of a maple tree. Well, they get into your gutter, and if you haven't cleaned your gutters out for the year, and there's like junk in there, they can take root.
Yes. They sprout
So
and they grow instantly.
yeah, and those helicopters are really slick, and
Yeah.
I remember playing with them. I still play with them. What the heck? you, you see them laying in the yard in the spring, and you go out and pick up a whole bunch of them, and you throw them up in the air, and you watch them spin back down to earth.
Yeah, the same thing is with I don't know if you have cottonwood down there, but cottonwood seeds when they'll land and sprout instantly
Oh
everywhere.
wow. Hmm.
Same as the maple.
Yeah. My elm, when it was still here, poor thing, their their seeds were kind of like the maples, but they were just a disc, like a papery disc with one little seed in the middle of it. And our tree was so tall that you couldn't reach it, to pluck any of the seeds off. But certain years when the wind would blow and the rain, you'd get these seeds stuck all over the side of the house or all over your car. And I harvested a bunch of them, but I have yet to try and grow anything with them. I hope that they would grow as quick as the maples. Those maples, good heavens. If you don't weed your mulch bed during the spring, you'll have a maple tree growing in your mulch bed.
Yeah, oh, well, you'll have many. You'll have one every foot. Like they're just everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think though, like with all those seeds sprouting out, why or like I don't think they make it through their first year. I don't know what it is, but the next
Well,
year
yeah.
they're
Well,
gone.
the lawnmower gets them.
If you mow your
Yeah.
yard, yes.
Yeah. I'm not a biologist here, but I had always understood that um, when a living organism reproduces, but they have like a zillion seeds, you know, that they have low probability of, one of them making it,
Yep. Yeah. The,
you know.
the the odds are that, or I guess nature's whatever it's called, is the fact
Uh-huh.
you throw out 1,000, you hope to get one that grows.
Like I have a pond, and certain times of the year, you'll see this goo on the top of the water, and they're frog eggs. And I mean like millions of them,
Yep.
And then like the next week, there'll be these little microscopic tadpoles floating around. But then, next year there's like two frogs.
Yeah. Every stage of development, the numbers decrease
Right. And man, but these maple trees, I mean, they'll get a million of those helicopters on them.
and they fall everywhere.
Yeah, they do. And that got me to thinking when we think about firewood, and one of the ironies with me is even though I'm in firewood, being in firewood has made me appreciate trees more than I did before. And I wouldn't call myself like a wood snob, but I kind of have an appreciation for trees like some of these people do for wine,
Oh, yeah. I
you
can.
know?
Yep.
And like wine, I'll be honest with you, I don't understand it. And but man, when you hear someone, watch a video of people wine tasting, and they're like, "Oh my god, this is a fruit forward, and the finish is just spectacular." And and you think, well, it all tasted like the other bottle to me.
Yep. Yeah. You don't notice any there. You don't go through all those little phases of the
Yeah.
process.
Well, and it's because I don't appreciate it, but I do appreciate trees, where someone else who doesn't will look at me or you like we're the weird ones,
Right.
because we can appreciate that elms like to grow out in the open by themselves, and sycamores like to grow by the riverbed,
Right.
and maples like to grow out of my gutters.
Or just the fact that when you see a tree like in distress or dying, like you actually, you kind of feel sorry, you feel bad, like you have
Yeah.
emotions that come over you. Like up here, we have the oak wilt that's hitting really bad. And this year it's been tough just this summer, like with the drought, being dry and so hot. I think it's really stressed a lot
Uh
of
huh.
trees. And in my wood yard now, I have like up to, I think there's 10 oaks that have died.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's terrible. I think of trees like the elm and the chestnut, the ash tree, which are all dying. And even though like the elm has been devastated by Dutch elm disease, I still see a number of healthy elms. But I had been saying I have never seen a live ash in the last few years. They are all dead. And I was out at a customer's house making a delivery, and there is a big tree. And I was looking at it thinking, wonder what kind of tree that is. It was an ash, and it's healthy. I mean,
Wow.
this was something that you should call the local TV channel. I says, Bud, I said, this is a rarity. It was definitely an ash, and it was big and healthy. Well, like you talked about the emotion, I started feeling sorry for it.
Yeah.
I was thinking, man, this thing here could be a goner. If I had like a beetle on this log that I was delivering, I could be killing this guy's tree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. But I think the ash trees would have these helicopters too, but they didn't have as much of a lift. They were more like spears kind of a look, instead of like that big blade that a maple tree has.
Yeah, they're more of a drop and not like a spread. Like the
Yeah.
maple seeds will spread and just be carried with the wind, and as they fall, they go down slow, so they keep
Yeah.
spreading out further and further.
So then what happens then, Dan? Okay, so it doesn't land in my gutter and it grows for a year until next year I get up there and I yank it out and throw it on the ground and it dries up. So if a seed, let's say that this is just a lone maple tree and the seed falls to the ground and it survives, it takes root and it grows into a tree. I guess that's how it happens, huh?
Yeah, yeah. But there's a lot of, I think, variables and factors that come in. Like if it lands in your yard and it's sitting on top of your grass, it's not going to have the ability to take root in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that come into factor
Mm-hmm.
just with for that process to, I guess, take root.
When I was trying to build up my soil here, because this house, it got dug out and then the pond. And so we had a lot of clay, and I had a bunch of cow manure trucked in where I was building up my soil. And I started getting all these seeds or all these weeds growing from the seeds that was in the manure.
Yeah.
And, you could get a tree growing out of cow manure because the cow had ate it, but the seed made it through the digestive tract
Right.
and grew. Then it's the same thing with like birds. So a
Yep.
bird could eat the seed of some type of a plant, maybe a tomato plant or a flower, and the bird dropping could contain the seed, and then that gets it to grow.
Yeah. It's amazing all the different, I
All the
guess, way.
variables.
Yeah, the ways that nature spreads and continues to
Yeah.
grow.
But have you ever thought about this though, Dan? When you are stacking a load of firewood and you pick up the split and you think, this is just a gorgeous piece of firewood. Have you ever stopped to think about that this tree could have started through a bird dropping 2 counties over
um,
a
I,
100 years ago?
I, actually, I can honestly say I've never had that thought.
Well, I'm serious though. I mean,
No,
let's
yeah,
think about this here.
yeah,
Let's think about this, okay? A bird, I'm just going to say 100 years ago, went out for a fly, and uh, there was a family outside looking over of the horizon, waiting for the husband or the son to come home from World War I, and a bird flies by and poops on the ground. Am I allowed to say poop on a
yes,
podcast? I don't know. So, and then, and it's in the field, and the years come and grow, and it's a tree, and the family just lets it grow, and it becomes a big, gorgeous tree. And
yeah,
maybe like it showed up in paintings or portraits of the farmhouse, and then, then birds build nests in it, and there's picnics held underneath it. And then the years come and go.
yeah. And then the family moves out of the house. They sell the land. A developer buys it and decides to build more houses and cut down all the trees.
And then they tear down the farmhouse too.
Yep, everything gone. Farmhouse gone, trees gone, and log hauler Jesse grabs the log, brings it to your yard. You process it, take it to Fire Thunderbirds, and it cooks a burger for the grandpa that used to live in the farmhouse, or something like that.
That's the circle of life, right? Isn't have you ever really stopped to think about, the logs and where they've come from? And like I had counted a tree. I had logs delivered, and it was a big trunk. And I counted the rings, and there was like 70 plus of them. And I was thinking, wow, 70 years ago, what was going on?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I've
that
done that
and
a
that
few times with trees. Is just look at the rings and think, try to like think back, what was going on or how long this tree's been alive. And
I used to belong to this foundation in Virginia. It's called the Germana Foundation. Dad and I would go to it, and it was like a celebration of the first settlers from Germany that came to the New World. And the foundation bought this centuries old house. It was built like in the 1700s, and we were up in it walking around, and I got up into the attic, and the main beam of the house was this big square beam, and it had like the marks of the axe, where it was hewn into a
mm,
log like that. So I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm thinking, well, if this house was built in the mid 1700s, and that beam up there probably came from a tree that could have been 300 years old. In theory, that tree could have been standing, when Columbus was coming to the New World.
right.
So I thought, I have to touch it. I have to touch it. And it was in reach. I had to jump, which wasn't the problem, but the problem would have been landing, because I didn't know if I was going to like fall through the to the floor. But I did. I jumped up and I touched it. A tree
Oh,
that was probably in the 1400s growing here in the United States, in the New World. Yeah. But just think about, you know, trees. And I'm serious. I get these trucks that come in with 100 sticks on them. And who am I? Am I worthy of these trees to cut them into firewood?
yeah. I don't know. It's kind of wild to think about it that way. I have to say I've never really, I've given some thought, but yeah, this is quite thought provoking now to think where those trees were, how long they've been there, and how they got started.
Yeah. Maybe that means we're spending too much time alone.
I don't know about that.
But I am going to challenge you, Dan, and I'm going to challenge our listeners. The next log that you get, count the rings on it and then do your math. For me, that's where I get out my calculator and figure out where were you when this tree was uh, fell out of the sky in a bird dropping.
Right. Or a squirrel digging and burying a nut, like a hickory nut or a walnut for future consumption, forgets
Yeah.
about it, and it grows into a tree. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
It's amazing that we're all here.
Yeah, that is then the other thing is, I guess I've never really thought about it when I'm processing or like handling the firewood, but I have, I don't know if you've ever noticed certain, I know you had your elm tree, but like on the drive down to my parents at a neighbor's farm, there used to be this big iconic oak tree in the middle of a field on a hill. And I
Yeah.
would always see that. And last summer, a storm blew it over and now it's gone. And it's like every time I drive down this road, I see that and there's like a void that, it's like something's missing from my trip
Sure.
because that tree is gone.
Huh. Yeah. Well, that's the way things become. I
Yeah.
always talk about our couch. you know, we never appreciate the couch in the corner until it's gone one day. But the same thing, the same thing for trees, huh?
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe I am not. I'm not a tree hugger. I appreciate trees, but they serve a purpose to us, and it just seems like sometimes though that maybe trees shouldn't become firewood. I don't know. When our elm tree fell down, I did save the trunk and I had some boards made out of it. I haven't done anything with them yet, but I got boards made out of it. But like the limbs and everything, the elms, they got those boughs that just go all the way up through so much wood in an elm tree. Yeah, and I heated our house with it. It
Right.
just seemed like it was unfair.
Well, back quick to the ring. Notice, when you mentioned challenging me to counting the rings.
Yes.
The other interesting thing that I've noticed when I do take the time to do that is from species to species how thick and how big the growth rings actually are.
Yeah.
So like on, like some pine and even like ash trees and maples, you'll like those, they'll have like quarter to half inch growth rings.
Uh-huh.
And then you'll look at like an oak and it'll be like, millimeter, like just tiny little spaces between each ring.
Yeah, which indicates, a fast growing or a slow growing species, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think also you can read these rings where there's a pace that you can see in the rings over the years. And then there'll be one where they're really close, really small. And the scientists would say that there was a drought that year.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I haven't taken it that far, but, and I still have I have a cutting from my trunk on my elm tree. Can you believe it? I've never counted the rings on it yet. I just haven't done
Oh,
it, but it's out there. And I would just be curious to see how old that thing was because I think it was pretty old. The elm trees before Dutch elm, they lasted a long time.
yeah. And they and those were when they're big like that, I mean, with the rings being tied together mostly on big trees like that, I mean, it's hundreds of years potentially.
Sure. Well, there was a tree in New England. Its name was Herbie. It was an elm. They had finally had to cut it down, but I think George Washington had given a speech under it, you
Wow.
know, so it was at least that old. But like these maple trees, I don't know, they don't seem to last as long. We had in town, our one main street was just lined with these big maple trees, and they cut them all down, and every single one of them was rotted out.
Yep.
The like the base of those get rotted out, and then they fall over in a windstorm.
Yeah. And they
Yeah.
get almost too big, and gravity actually will, break the big limbs off. Like if you have a big codominant stem where you have like a trunk that has multiple stems coming out of it,
Uh-huh.
start growing, and as they're reaching for more light, they start growing more horizontal than vertical. And at a certain point, they get to, so big that their own weight and gravity breaks them off.
Yeah. Here's an idea for firewood. So there was a guy, I'll have to look for this. He makes boards. He has a mill. And instead of just sawing boards and selling them, he would buy the trees like off of a family. And the family would tell them the story of the tree, about they remember when it was planted and so and grandpa. And he would write up a profile of that tree and he would sell it with the boards. And he was able to command a higher price for his wood because that wood had a legacy. And
Oh,
like one guy bought one, he wanted to make his own casket for when he passed away. And the wood that he used from it, was important because it had a story behind it. And I wonder if we can do the same thing with firewood. Like if there was a century tree or a witness tree like what you had on, that fell down, that you could advertise that wood came from that tree, I bet you people would pay more money for it.
right. That's possible. But then wouldn't you just be, if you used it as firewood, then you would be ending that legacy, right?
Yeah, but it's still providing. And you're putting it back into the potentiality of matter. So then
See,
the ashes are now valuable.
oh, or you could flip it and you could say something like this: maple firewood is from a tree that for decades put its seeds in my gutter, and all of its children were sprouting and causing me complete, frustration. And here it is. Get rid of
Yeah,
this thing. put it
right.
to, put it out of its misery.
Yeah. At my dad's house, now we sold it. When I was a little boy, I got a helicopter and grew it in a cottage cheese container.
Uh,
And it grew and we planted it in the backyard and that tree is still there and it is big, so
wow.
it's probably over 40 years old. Well, over the years when we bought this place out here, I took some helicopters off of it and I got its, I don't know, son or daughter growing in our yard, so the
Nice.
the the family tradition continues. Yeah.
That is very cool.
Until it falls and smashes our house, and then that'd be a terrible idea. What were you thinking of?
No, that's pretty cool. That is very a very unique. See, now there's a good story to follow along with the tree. Yeah.
Hmm. Dan, I just thought this was a fun discussion. I think too often we look at firewood as just firewood and we forget where it came from.
Yes, I agree. Very good observation here by you. I've never really thought much into it till right now.
Yeah. I just had a triaxle load of logs delivered. There's a big one on there. And I'm going to do, when we're done here, I'm taking you outside and we're going to count the rings in it.
Yeah. Let's and find out what was going on when that tree was born.
Yeah. Yeah. You never know. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, Dan, do you think it's time we strike up the band?
Yes, let's let these woodhounds go out there and start counting their rings in their wood yard.
Yeah. Well, if anyone out there has a tree that has a lot of rings in it, or if you have a story about burning or making firewood out of a tree that had a legacy, why don't you send us an email? Dan, what's our email address?
Thewoodhounds@gmail.com. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'd like to hear from some listeners out there. The old one, maybe like the oldest tree they ever had in their wood yard, or they, like you said, just legacy trees.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you say, Dan? Let's get out of here.
All right, yeah, let's get out there and I gotta get. I might have to. Do you have glasses? My eyesight's going bad. I gotta be able to count these rings, keep track of them there.
You use the camera on your cell phone. That's how I do it.
Oh, that is a good tip.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in and listening to the Woodhounds podcast, the #1 firewood podcast in the world.
And we want to thank everyone for checking in and making us the #1 firewood podcast in the world.
Yeah. Woo! All right, Joe. Let's get out there and count those rings.
Okay, Dan, I'm going to wish you and everyone else
a great day.